Hello all, welcome to this artist talk for Folding Spaces, our current exhibit for the month of June at Northwind Art. I'm Michael D'Alessandro, I'm the exhibits director here. And first, before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we gather here today on the ancestral homelands of the S'Klallam, Suquamish, Makah, Chimicum, and Squamish nations, as well as nations who met and traded and created art in this area. Native peoples have cared for these lands from time immemorial and continue to do so today. And please join me in expressing our deepest respect and gratitude. Welcome to this artist talk. And Jeanne Toal and Randal Leek are our artists today. And they are presenting here at Northwind Art's Best Gallery, the Folding Spaces exhibit. I'm going to introduce the artist by reading a bio, and then I'm going to show a video of the walkthrough of the exhibit. In case you have not seen the exhibit, it's a good idea to get a sense before we start talking. And then the artists are going to do a slide presentation each, and we will open up the floor for questions at the end. And just a little bit of housekeeping, repeat the housekeeping. If we keep our mics muted, that'll help with the noise. And if you want your video open, that's up to you. It's a small enough group. When we get to the question and answer period, you can do one of two things. Put your questions in the chat and I will call on you, or you could just simply raise your hand or use the raise your hand feature on the bottom bar of the Zoom, and I will call on you and you can ask your questions. So without further ado, let me introduce the artists. Jeanne Toal, for most of her life, had a sense that there's a mystery at the boundaries of what is known. One way she tried to tap into this mystery is through the world of healing. What heals? What is healing? Those questions propelled her through an early career in painting, a deep dive into medical writing, a decade working with mentally and physically ill individuals living without homes, another as a body therapist in hospitals and hospices, 5 years in a refugee resettlement program, and now, again, painting full-time. Randal Leek, although a lifelong resident of Washington State, he has lived and worked overseas for over 25 years in humanitarian assistance in Sudan, Tajikistan, Azerbaijan, Albania, India, Pakistan, and most recently in Afghanistan. He has been the featured artist in Yakima magazine, and his sculptures have been exhibited in the US Embassy in Kabul and in galleries in Edmonds, La Conner, Ellensburg, Cannons Beach, and Yakima, where he now lives. He received his MS in engineering from the Washington State University. When reading their bios, I realized these two artists had not met. We curated this exhibit from two separate proposals because of the strength of their work. We had not met the artists either, but I was intrigued by their backgrounds, that they both worked in the socially in social work, really, internationally and nationally, and I thought that was really interesting. And their work communicates really well together on the floor of the art gallery. So I will show you now how that plays out. I'm going to share my screen, and you will see a video come up. And it's about 3 minutes, so we'll just let that play. And that didn't work. Just a second. Technical difficulties. Is everybody seeing that? All right, here we go. Okay. It's a lovely exhibit, and I encourage you all to come out and see it in person. Um, I think that's all of us. I haven't found any new admittees here, but and they both have been working. Both these artists have been working for around 5 years in their craft. So it's the parallels are numerous, and I just think that that is wonderful. So without further ado, I think I'm going to start with Jeanne. Jeanne will have a presentation to share with us.
Okay. Thanks, Michael. Also, excuse me, thanks for your support and patience in putting together this exhibition and this talk. I appreciate that. And Randal, I'm so grateful that we were chosen to exhibit together. Like Michael says, I think our work works really well together. I heard one person speculate that the paintings and the sculptures talk at night when the galleries shut down. I like that image. And I want to thank one more person, Mike Flores, my husband, who created all of the cradle boards in the show. And as you saw, there are a lot of them. I might as well acknowledge right now up front that I'm a rookie at this. I've never done a Zoom lecture, much less a Zoom lecture with a presentation. I already know that there's one slide in my presentation that doesn't belong there, and I haven't been able to find how to get it out. So I hope you will bear with me as I go through what sociologist Brene Brown calls an FFT. If you're curious, you can look that up. Talking about painting is complicated. For me, painting is about feeling, connection, emotional responses, making visible the intangible. And while I love words and their attempt to grasp reality, applying them to what happens between me and a flat surface feels kind of awkward, if not actually arrogant. The writer Pico Iyer puts it this way: the mind places footnotes and second thoughts and qualifications where once there was simply radiance. Not that my paintings are necessarily radiant, but all I really can offer this evening are footnotes and after the fact constructs of what may or may not have happened in the studio. Given that, I will say that my painting has never been narrative driven. Instead, each piece is a way for me to scratch at the surface of life, as the extraordinary painter Anne Neely puts it, to dig deeper and find meaning. I might as well admit right now that I'm a meaning junkie, and that for most of my life, I've been fascinated by the ephemeral, with things that shift from one form to another. My work in both the creative and the human services fields has shown me that there's power and energy in the spaces between things. With the paintings in this show, I explore those spaces through the concept of liminality. Liminal comes from lumen, not lumen, limen, a Latin word meaning threshold or doorway. Liminal states are in-between places, spaces where something is moving from the known to the unknown and hasn't arrived there yet. Some people have called this last pandemic year a liminal time. Life as we knew it stopped and has yet to begin again. That points out the challenging, stuck, and difficult aspects of liminal states. And then there's the other side. In between places are full of potential. Anything is possible until what comes next happens. And in that apparently empty waiting space, there's freedom and beauty. Theologian Richard Rohr is often quoted about this side of liminality, and I'll take a moment here to bring up his quote. Okay, let me read this for you. It's a little long, but it speaks directly to all my paintings in this show. Liminal space is where we are betwixt and between the familiar and the completely unknown. There alone is our old world left behind, while we are not yet sure of the new existence. That's a good space where genuine newness can begin. Get there often and stay as long as you can by whatever means possible. This is the sacred space where the old world is able to fall apart and a bigger world is revealed. If we don't encounter liminal space in our lives, we start idealizing normalcy. Here we are taught openness and patience. How to show any of that visually, of course, is the question. When thinking about this talk, I realized that the development of my painting practice is just as much the story of my non-practice. I started painting in my mid-20s while living in Reno, Nevada. And although hold on a second here. Which is slow. Okay, I started painting in my mid-20s while living in Reno, Nevada. And while I did not like the heat or the general bright light, something about that landscape was compelling to me. And when I stumbled into a beginning painting class at the local YMCA, I found something I didn't know I had been looking for, a way to respond to that landscape. And the first day of that class set me up for the way that I still paint today. As instructed, I'd bought tubes of oil paint that turned out to be tubes of watercolor paint. Not knowing this, I mixed them with oil medium and applied them to the canvas on an easel and watched everything run off the canvas onto the floor. So this is painting, I thought, what fun. For the next few years, I used watercolors freely, unrestrained by its traditional qualifications and limitations. I did what I wanted with what I had on hand to get the effects that I wanted. 50 years later, I still approach painting as an adventure. When I turned 30, we left the desert for the California coast. Beautiful as it was there, I couldn't find anything that excited my eye. So eventually I stopped painting and took up a series of different careers. Now looking back, I can see that what was linking all those different jobs was a deep interest in healing. I remember wondering, what does healing really mean and how does it happen? And that's still a wondering that is behind anything I try to paint nowadays. As Michael said, I started out writing about medical research, focusing on new developments in neuroscience that showed how our thoughts and our feelings impact our bodies. I next found myself deeply involved in the world of homeless services, where healing looked like a 7 a.m. conversation with somebody who had just rolled out from under a bush. I then worked with low-income families and individuals struggling with mental health and learned that healing has a lot to do with one's environment. And my next career, working with hospital and hospice patients, showed me the clear difference between curing and healing. It also showed me that everyone is a healer and not just healthcare people, and that everyone has a potential for growth and healing. I took those words to heart. And by the time I landed here 4.5 years ago, I not only had a deep respect for the healing process, but also a lot of experience with transitions, mine and others, and a desire to put those awarenesses to use. I decided to pick up where I had left off 50 years ago, and this show is the result. I really enjoy looking at other people's studios. This is mine. It's a small building, 10 by 12 feet. It's actually a garden shed. We converted and added windows to it and a tiny front porch. I'm ritualistic. Some people would say driven, to be in the studio in the morning, and I stay put until later in the afternoon, pretty much 7 days a week. When I get frustrated, I've been known to paint the inside walls of the studio, but they always go back to white. Let's see. As you can see, it can get tight in there. I tend to paint, most paintings are at least 30 by 40 inches. And I paint a lot of paintings at one time. I particularly have problems when I have a painting like this one, which is 6 feet by 3 feet and takes up a whole back wall, my only wall without windows. And this painting's been hanging around, I don't know, for about a year now and refuses to come forward. So I think I'm going to sand it down soon and start again. At least I'll sand down part of it. And that's the process that a number of the paintings in this show have gone through. I tend to work in layers and I subtract as much as I add. Let's see. I generally start a painting with a feeling of color. Oh, this is the slide I mentioned that doesn't belong in here. Yes, I started painting with a color feeling or a color sense. For the paintings in this show, that feeling is often coupled with a feeling of movement, and that movement is often shown as water. Water captures, for me, the momentary aspect of experience, how quickly an experience can shift from being one thing to another. But it's color alone that really initiates a painting and guides it throughout. I'll usually select one color and cover most of the surface with it. And then every other color is based on the previous color. I can get color ideas from almost anywhere. A slightly embarrassing source is the world of decorating magazines. I've been addicted to them since I've been 18. And while I like the room layouts and their highly designed advertisement pages that capture my color imagination, more than one painting has taken its initial form from one of those advertisements. All my paintings take on an active role in their development. I may be the one who comes up with a color and an idea, but after the first application of paint, the process becomes a conversation between me and the flat surface. Sometimes it can turn into an argument, and sometimes a loud one. I paint large partially for that reason. A surface with weight and size forces me to step into its space, where my efforts at control are diminished even more. The painting and I always end up going where the painting wants to go. I can call the result a success or a failure, but at that point, it just is what it is. In the last couple of weeks, I've gotten questions about what I paint on and what I paint with. I generally work on several different supports, including wood, clayboard, the less traditional multimedia artboard, and terraskin rock paper. Terraskin paper is made out of stone with no water or trees involved. It's an environmentally friendly paper that works equally well with water-based and oil paints. At first, I used watercolor on terraskin, then I tried acrylics, and finally oil pigment sticks. There are several brands of oil sticks, but I feel hard for R&F oil pigment sticks because of their soft, almost buttery quality. This is what they look like. They come singly or in sets, and their price is probably comparable to oil paint in slides, oil paint in tubes. I mostly paint with my hands, and to blend, I use inexpensive cosmetic brushes. I think I have a total of 3 real oil painting brushes that I use for glazing. Now, this is an early Terraskin painting. One of the things I liked about that kind of paper is that it came in large rolls, and this was my first effort at a large painting. I actually intended to paint a straightforward waterfall, but the paint and the paper somehow got together and mountain shapes and clouds appeared. It wasn't my idea. I can remember that. This is a Terraskin painting, a more recent one that I am really very fond of. There is a hint of a horizon line down at the bottom, and then all kinds of stuff going on up above. The horizontal lines, the white lines that are just visible, come from the board under the paper. And it was sort of like a rubbing when I ran the oil sticks over the paper. What surprised me when I finished this painting, that even though it's small, I think it's 18 by 35 inches, it felt large to me. And this is my most recent Terraskin painting. It's a real mixed media with watercolor, acrylic, oil, and I think some pastel. It was one of the last pieces I created during a month-long Centrum residency last year. I don't know what it represents, but it feels strongly as if it belongs in a liminal space show. When I look at it, I get a sense that something has just happened or is just about to happen. After working on Terraskin, I discovered multimedia artboard. Like Terraskin, multimedia artboard sheets accept both water and oil-based paints. Each sheet has a flat and a slightly textured side and is archival and non-buckling. I really enjoy working on it. The largest available sheet is 30 by 40 inches, and that's the size I still work with, no matter what the support I use. Multimedia artboard looks like watercolor. So in this painting and a few others, I tape the margins like you often do with watercolor. This was also one of my first waterfalls. I used any number of techniques on it, including pouring paint and tipping the board, spraying solvent on the paint and letting it run off. I think I remember putting some white oil paint from a tube on my hand and dragging it down the painting. It took a while, but eventually it all came together. This painting captures the movement of water in a less figurative manner. Here too, I poured and dripped paint and tried all kinds of things. This actually was a painting that I despaired of. No matter what I tried, it did not come together. So I put it away for a year or so. And when I took it back out, it had magically transformed into something I kind of liked. This work started out as a simple exploration of light and dark. It became more figurative than I had expected it to, and far more dramatic. The shapes you can kind of see rising out of the horizon were scraped back, and multimedia artboard can take a lot of heavy use and not shred. This was another study of contrast. I wanted to see how light and dark dissolve form and what would remain. This piece was also one of my first works on clayboard. Clayboard is hardboard coated with kaolin clay, which supposedly makes it similar to the clay grounds used during the Renaissance. The surface of clayboard is sanded until it's ultra smooth and very absorbent. That gives it a lot of great qualities, including how true colors appear, and some challenging ones, since for me at least, color can either stain or slide off the slippery surface, and I never know which is going to happen. This painting also explores light and dark, though in a gentler way. Shadows are evocative to me in the way forms seem to shift as the light on them changes. This painting is on board and not clayboard, and I let some of the roughness of the support show through. I work a lot in layers with most of my paintings. And as I said, there's as much subtraction often as there is addition. This is the first of a series of cloud paintings. And I've been reading a lot lately about quantum physics, at least to the extent that I can understand it. And I've been trying to apply that model to my notions of healing. Western medicine still primarily understands healing from the perspective of the mechanical model of physics. And I wonder what's possible if we approach it from the quantum model, where wave functions are connected to physical probabilities. This and my other cloud paintings attempt to visualize one aspect of that model where particles stay connected so that no matter how far apart they are, something done to one affects the other. That's a process called entanglement, and that's actually the title of this painting. Here I use dots and lines for the first time in order to suggest some of that. I experimented with white pencil, chalk, white paint applied with the edge of a squeegee, a ruler, and a very thin brush. I've since found that some gel pens will work on oil. And one of the great things about using oil sticks is that they dry relatively quickly, and it's possible to work on the surface within usually a day or two. This is another cloud painting, another exploration of time and movement. This and the next painting are different from anything I've done before. Both are large. This one, I believe, is 48 by 52 inches. Both are clayboard paintings, fairly abstract, while still suggesting a landscape. They're also examples of how tricky clayboard can be when it comes to coloring large surfaces with oil stick. The color goes on smoothly and blends well at one point. And then at another part on the clayboard, it absolutely refuses to blend. Like I said, tricky. This one too has a suggestion of landscape in the blue strip most of the way down. I apologize for this slide. For some reason, this particular painting tends to gray out when it's photographed. So I do want to say that on my website, this and the other paintings are much better represented. Okay, this brings me to my current obsession, gold leaf. I love working with imitation gold leaf. I found it really striking how gold has such a long history in so many cultures, representing prosperity and power and sacredness and spirituality, and how much that is to put on a metal that just doesn't tarnish. So lately, I've been exploring how something as solid and material as gold might reference in a painting of something as intangible as change and transition. I also like the idea of using composition gold leaf, which is just a fancy way of saying imitation gold leaf, to represent something so precious. And I was drawn to the challenge of learning how to use gold leaf. This is what it looks like in a package. It's very light and very fragile. It'll tear if you touch it and blow away if you breathe at all. Okay, this is my first gold leaf painting, and it's still a favorite of mine. It actually started out as a figurative painting of a bird, and that wasn't working. So I decided to cover the entire painting except for a 1 inch border with gold leaf. I liked what happened, and then I toned it down using the oil sticks until I got a tone that I like better. The shiny reflective aspect of gold leaf does not necessarily appeal to me. And finally, I used tape to pull off geometrically shaped pieces of gold leaf, revealing the color and the paint that was below. This painting is not in the show, but it's an indication where I might be going with gold leaf and paint. The image to me is reminiscent of traditional Chinese painting. I'm drawn to Asian art, and the same way I'm drawn to traditional Chinese medicine. I think they both have an interesting take on perspective and the human place in the universe. This one was an attempt to play off a sense of potential against the heavier, iconic aspects of gold. I covered the entire surface with gold leaf and then painted over it, leaving the center area unpainted. After toning down that area, I added charcoal. You can see it there, charcoal powder, to give a hint of something appearing. And I titled it Potential. And this work was fun to do. A lot of experimentation. The background is acrylic and not oil, which is unusual for me. Instead of using sheets of gold leaf, I'd laid down thin lines of it. And just for the heck of it, I dripped adhesive, let it firm up, and then rubbed it with bits of gold leaf. I like how it came out. This is going to be in a Northwind show. I believe it starts tomorrow, called Lost Words. And this is the painting behind me. I don't know if you can see it or not. It's not done, and I'm waiting for it to tell me what it wants done to it next. But I think my next painting will take off from this one. And that's it for me. There's my website, and thanks.
Thank you, Jeanne. It was great to hear how these paintings, how you created such light and softness and layering and texture and such a smooth surface. So that's really helpful to see all that and to hear your background with that and see your studio. It's always good to see an artist's studio, as you just said. All right, Randal Leek will be sharing a presentation as well. Randal, I will go ahead and share my screen because I'm going to put that up. So bear with me just a second. Great. Here we go.
Michael, I think that's starting down quite a ways.
Okay, let me go back here. Yep, we'll go to the start and play. There we go.
Okay.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Michael. This has been a great experience for me, and getting to know Jeanne through this. You didn't say it, but our proposals were accepted, I think, back in 2019, maybe. And we were scheduled first to show in November 2020, and then the COVID pandemic came along, and here we are. So it's been a long time coming, and we're here. So it's great. I'm going to talk about the process that I go through in a little different way. How I achieve the forms, the details of the shapes. So what overall I make two different categories. One is a free form style, and this slide shows 4 examples of pieces that I lay out and are pre-designed, let's call it. Next slide, Michael. These are freeform, and the majority of my work, I think, is freeform, and I enjoy doing both of them. it's a little, when I go through the freeform process, it's a bit nerve-wracking because I'm not quite sure where I'm headed, and what I'll find in the piece. And sometimes I end up throwing a piece that I can't see where it's going. I'll end it and start over again with another piece, or make radical changes in them, like flip them head over, head up and tail down. But that's kind of the two different styles that I use. The freeform starts, next slide, Michael. The freeform starts with a rough piece of natural tree trunk material, and in this case it's black walnut. And all my black walnut and most of my wood comes from trees within about a 10-mile radius of where I live in Yakima, Washington. And except for redwood, which comes from Northern California, obviously. I've got some relatives down in Mendocino, and so I go down there occasionally and get some restock up on redwood. I look for the natural inclusions in this, and in this you can see some knots down through the center. This actually is two pieces, and it had a fairly drastic crack right through the middle. So rather than try to work around that, I just split it like firewood and worked with two different pieces and have formed two different pieces out of it. And I look for those blemishes and things like burn marks or knots or wormholes or soft places where it's rotted even, and where that transitions from the deforms or the affected areas. The transition between that and the healthy wood often has really remarkable color, and I look for that and I try to use that in there. Next slide. And part of this process is once I've got the material, I figure out whether it's going to be laid horizontally or vertically, whether I'll have holes in it. In this case, I've decided that I'll make a curved line through it, and I'll drill that hole and grind it out later, as you'll see. And Michael, next slide. So that's that same piece of wood and what I've done to it. And part of that is what I've designed into it with that line of drilled holes, and a lot of it is from inclusions of knots and what may appear, in this case, a tiny branch that as I got deeper into the wood, from the center going out, it turned into quite a large dead area that I had to cut out and form around, and that's really common. How I think of it is, if you take a two-dimensional painting, you think of the edges, the frame as the edging and the limits of the composition. In my 3D sculptures, I think of the base and the top as the two limits, let's say, the critical points that your eye goes either from the top to the bottom, and in the middle you want something that creates the beauty of it, the curiosity, something that will draw you around to the other side and give you that three-dimensional aspect that when you look at it from different directions, you'll see something new, and it makes sense from all sides, and each angle that you look at it will logically transform into the other side, and it's not shocking, and it's not a series of two-dimensional images, and I don't use a lot of, I don't use any like details. I let the wood grain and the defects and the coloration of the grains speak for themselves, and try to bring that out when I work on it. There needs to be a logic to it. And that logic is basically moving from one side to the other, and not turning you off. You know, it makes you excited about the piece. It makes you feel comfortable that it's all integral. Let's go to the next slide. And here it is finished, and that is mounted on a pin, and most of my pieces are mounted on pins so that you can turn it without having to turn the base, and it's balanced, and I think it makes it more interactive to live with and play with and move and touch, and that's really what I'm after, is to get people involved in my work in a three-dimensional sense, and to you know, have it make sense from all different sides. And where I come from with these natural forms, or organic forms or free forms, is that I want the final piece to look as if it were the only thing that it could be, that it had always been this way, that it's obviously the best form for this particular sculpture. And I think of a ballet dancer who is very light and quick and delicate, but with amazing, solid and strong, fundamentally graceful features. And that's where my aesthetics come from, I think, is a lightness and delicacy and strength. Let's next slide. I think the next question is about where my inspiration comes from and what drives me to create my pieces, and you know, how these speak to me. It's really a process of discovery. It's in the free form. I can only do the pre-designed ones when I know that the wood itself is pretty homogeneous, that it doesn't have a lot of blemishes in it. So I, like this one, had a lot of blemishes, and I work around those, and I bring them out, or take them out, and try to bring out the grain around those pieces. When I finish a sculpture, I bring it into our living room and study it at home, in the home setting, in our living room here. The light is different. The scale of the room is different from my shop. And I rotate it and look at it from all sides, and my wife and I sit and talk about it over dinner or lunch, and we each stand up and turn it, and we say, well, maybe we need to take off a little more over here, or maybe this line needs to blend in at a lower point, or we go through it. And my wife is a great critique, and when I'm making it, I'm thinking, what is Farida going to think about this? So it's fun to do that. And when I get to the point where I think it needs more work, I'll take it back out, make those changes, go through the whole process of grinding out a new shape, sanding it down, and refinishing it, and bring it back in, look over again, and finally get to the point where it looks good, it looks fine, and I will also take it back out, sand it a bit more, smooth it out, go over it with steel wool and wax, and really polish it. And at that point, it becomes a I'm totally in love with it. I'm like infatuated with this thing, and it's a point where I really don't want to let go. I don't want to give it to a gallery. I don't want to take it to a show. I want it to be in my house and just live with this thing. And that's what is my inspiration. It's a really personal sense about the piece. Michael, next show or next slide. And even though I've sanded and I know every centimeter or millimeter of the surface, it looks in different lights. The grain has different highlights, and they're fun to live with anyway. I enjoy it, and I really it really is what keeps me going with this, because unlike Jeanne's workshop, mine is dusty and really dirty, and I wear face masks and goggles, and it's noisy, so I have earplugs but I have my earbuds and my music and my going all the time, or an audiobook or whatever. And with all of that on, my grinding sounds about as loud as a clothes washer. So it's pretty quiet actually, but I'm constantly fighting allergies and my sinuses. So it's quite a bit different process in that, but it's a love affair with my sculptures. Next slide, Michael. This is one of my favorites actually, called Onpoint, and it's in the show, and it has taken me a long time to let it go. Anyway, it's come about by, originally it was horizontal, and it was matched with a piece of maple that was complementary to it in a way that you would think of spoons in bed with your lover. And it didn't quite work, but that was my intent to begin with. And I thought, okay, I want to make this beautiful in a way that still is delicate and full of strength. And I mounted it this way, and it rotates, and so I'm in love with this still. So it's hard to let it go. But let's look at the next one, Michael. So I'm going to talk about my career. I was an engineer. I have a degree in engineering. I can't really say that I was an engineer. And my work overseas with refugees and emergency assistance had a lot to do with refugee protection and human rights. And so when I'm working with my sculptures, I see a lot of contemporary sculptures that have the artist wants to make a statement about a social injustice or politics or some aspect of our society. And for me, I'm not at all into that. I want my art to take the viewers in a different direction of humans as a species. We are fixated on the material world and on our politics, and it's become kind of a zero-sum game as acceptable all around, and so I'm off of that. I'm not doing that. I lived that for too long, and I have a high enough respect for mankind, humankind, that we are capable of so much more than our culture allows us. So I'm kind of fixated on doing more rather than the same. I did woodworking overseas. I didn't have power tools as much as I do now. And obviously I was working full time, and I would be away from home and away from my wife and my house, where you have constant things to do with your home. And so I had a lot of time to do handwork on wood pieces, and found just incredible hardwood that had hardwoods that we don't find here, that would not ever be used for lumber because it was twisted and dried and cracked and had all sorts of blemishes, and so it was used for firewood. In Khartoum, there would be stacks and stacks of it that they burn in their stoves for heating the home, and the same in Kabul, Afghanistan. And so for the type of wood that I was looking for, it was perfect. And I basically would work on it in my living room and wherever I was living, and use scrapers and files and sandpapers and knives, chisels, that sort of thing. And so that was where I started. When I got to Kabul, I had the use of the carpentry shop and quite a bit more sophisticated equipment. And when I would make things, my colleagues and the national staff really were encouraging, really loved my work. And I had, I was sort of amazed that anyone would really appreciate it. And it was encouraging. And I came home and went around to galleries with my things. And galleries are the people, the owners and the workers, the salespeople have always been encouraging. Nobody ever said, no, that's garbage. It would be more like, it's nice work, but we don't do that kind of work or we don't sell that kind of sculpture in our shop. So you need to go talk to such and such down the road. And so that, amazed me that they didn't just throw me out on my ear and say, don't come back. There was always encouragement from gallery owners, and really they're the market knowledge for a certain area. And I respected that, and I love working with galleries now. So I grew up in Puget Sound, and I guess going back to where I began with my love of nature, and a lot of the lines and a lot of the features are from my experience with nature and skiing and hiking and climbing in the mountains and diving and living around the waterfront and all of the things that we have in Puget Sound that are just incredible, that I can't say aren't in other places of the world, but we live in such a wonderful place. And even in Yakima, it's quite a bit drier and different over here. But as I was growing up, we would come over to this side of the mountains for camping and just, part of the experience of growing up in the Northwest is Eastern Washington. So where this is going, I think, in my life, the woodworking for the sake of art has been probably the most rewarding thing I've done in my life. I wish that I would have studied fine arts when I was in high school and college. Frankly, I'm a terrible drawer now, and I was terrible then. And I didn't, in my home, and it was always about the starving artist, and it was kind of a, not pragmatic to go that direction. So, I studied bacteriology and then construction management and then engineering, and went into Peace Corps, and that changed my life and in a whole different direction and led me into my international work. So now going forward, I need to really find out whether kind of what part of the market I fit into, and that that might sound capitalistic, but I need to pay for my sandpaper and my tools. And I love doing small pieces from, let's say, 15 to 25 inches tall. And I also, this one is about 40 inches tall, and I love doing that. But they don't always fit in the home, and people don't necessarily relate to it other than to look at it. Michael, can we go down to the next one? I'm not sure what I've got left. That might be the last one.
Yes, that was the last.
Okay. Okay. So, I mean, right now I'm just trying to explore where I can go, explore what other people like. I enjoy all of it, and I'm having fun doing it. I totally appreciate getting into a gallery, almost any gallery up in Port Townsend, but especially the Northwind, because of the fine things you guys do. It's just been delightful, and Jeanne especially. It's been good to get to know you. So that's it. Questions?
Well, thank you, Randall. Thank you, Jeanne. We have a few minutes that we can have some questions if there are any. I will open the chat here and take a look, or you can just turn on your video and raise your hand. Anybody have any questions? Well, I might have just one quick question for you, Randall, and one for Jeanne. I noticed that you're including stone and alabaster in your pieces and contouring them as a continuation of the wood or in some form working with the wood. I wanted to hear a little bit about the evolution of that.
Well, I'll give credit to Carla Matsky over on Camino Island. And she has every year a stone carving class, several classes. I just came from one that was power tools used in stone carving. And it's very much like what I do with woodworking with power tools. So alabaster is, I've made several complete sculptures with alabaster, and I love the way it looks when I'm finished. It creates a huge amount of dust, and it's fairly soft, and so so I'd rather not work with it as a main course. I'd rather add it in as a highlight. And I had one gallery owner show me an abstract painting, or I think it was a seascape, and it was, you know, a dark image, and down in the corner was this girl with a red rain jacket on, and it's kind of like that. It's a highlight that I add to it just to add interest and a feature to it.
Great, thank you. And one question for you, Jeanne. It's similar to what I see happening in Randall's work, a similar question, but in your work, I see these really, you know, amidst all of the softness, there's this rectangle or some kind of shape that has really crisp lines, and I just want to hear a little bit about how those shapes enter your pieces, if that makes sense.
I'm not sure what the how quite asks. I use them to break up the surface, break up the, as you said, the softness, and to suggest that something else is going on. And it's my thinking that there's a whole lot going on beyond our human sensory apparatus. I mean, they've shown that we can only sense so much. And I have a feeling that behind or with or in between everything, there's energy and vibration and stuff going on, and those hard edges maybe ideally kind of crack open the surface that we live on.
Great. Well, any other questions for our artists before we break?
Well, Michael, I'll
Yeah.
add something. In the process that I go through, Jeanne was talking about having several paintings going on at one time, and
Mhm.
I do the same thing. You know, I'll have maybe 4 or 5 different sculptures going on, and I look at them, and you know, how am I going to form them? So I go through maybe a similar process. Maybe all artists do that. I think probably so.
Oh, Kelly.
I have a question.
Sure.
Where did the title for the show come from?
Oh, good question. As the artists mentioned, we chose this exhibit, or chose these exhibitors back in 2019. So this has been a long time coming. And I think, Randal, you might have been even further back, because we got your proposal a year prior, or maybe even 2 years prior. The show title came about during the selection process, and we held on to it through the pandemic. And when we remounted the exhibit on this calendar, we kept the title, and wasn't sure how it originated, to be honest. But we had an exhibit committee that worked through some of the creative aspects at the time when we were Northwind Art Center, and that's a long answer. But what's interesting about it is we kept the title because we felt that the space in the gallery would be folding as we move through it, and there is a little bit of that going on. Maybe not quite folding; it's more fluid than that. But that's a condition of time, I guess.
It's
And
an
lag,
abstract
time lag.
concept, you know?
What's that?
It's an abstract concept.
It is. It is.
Isn't that what the navigators did in Dune?
Well,
Create
Perhaps.
space.
Yeah, folding space, sure.
Yeah.
And it does show a little in the work, and just in the talk we just heard, of how perception is addressed and challenged in both the artist's work. Well, I want to thank you all. We're just over 8 o'clock here, and thank you for giving up this time in your evenings to hear this enlightening artist talk. And I want to thank the artists Jeanne Toal and Randal Leek once again. And I'm certainly enjoying this exhibit every day I come in. And I wish it were up for longer, but it runs through the end of the month, the 26th of this month. So so please come and see it if you're able. And if there's not any last words, I'll go ahead and sign us off. And once again, thank you for supporting Northwind Art. Bye now.
thank you, Michael.
Bye-bye.
Bye.